Greetings everybody, my name's Tommy the Game Master. Welcome to my channel. Well, the Steam Summer Sale is going on right now, and I do want to talk about some of my RPG recommendations I have. I'm going to keep this video a little short than normal, mainly sticking to some of the RPGs I have played on my PC and not jumping around to others that I have played on the PS3 and PS4, just keeping these Steam related. So here are a few RPGs I've played that I recommend with the sale price. Definitely worth checking out. We're going to start with the granddaddy of all JRPG franchises, Final Fantasy. And the first one I'm going to take a look at and talk about is Final Fantasy VI, which is available for $7.99. Now, I won't lie, I reviewed this one just a few months ago. The gameplay is broken, and when it comes to an updated graphical port, Square Enix got the scenery right, it got the monsters, it got the bosses right. The only thing they screwed up is the main character sprites, and they look laughably bad. It's one of the reasons why a lot of old school JRPG enthusiasts criticize these updates, because they just don't really look right when it comes to the main characters. But once you get past it, it's actually a really great game, one of the finest in the 16-bit era. The story is super solid, probably one of the best Final Fantasy stories out there. You got a solid lineup of characters, and the best thing about this game is how easily it can be broken. All you need is to equip the right Magicite to the right mage characters and grind them for a little while, and you can be spamming moves like Ultima, Meteor, and all sorts of crazy stuff, wreaking havoc on the battlefield. I do love this game. The next game I want to talk about is Final Fantasy IX. It is on sale for $10.49, also half off. Final Fantasy IX is probably my favorite of the PlayStation 1 era games. It's got an actual upbeat protagonist, unlike its two other brothers on the PS1, which had kind of these dour moods. Zidane's actually upbeat. The graphics are colorful. It's got a sense of humor. Despite the fact that story-wise this is probably one of the darkest Final Fantasies, as it does really deal with life and death. Basically, how does one come to terms with their mortality and what happens to us after death, what goes on in the world after we die. It's a really great game. Recommend it. Of course, Final Fantasy X and X-2 is also up for $14.99. These are the Japanese special editions. I haven't played quite a lot of the PC versions, but from what I have played, it seems to run well on my system, enough for me to recommend these ports. It's a pretty good game. Definitely recommend the Final Fantasy X and X-2. 10 is probably one of the darkest story-wise in the series. It's really melancholy, doom and gloom everywhere. It's basically, this world is really on its last legs after being attacked by a demon that keeps coming back for over 1,000 years, named Sin. And what the main characters are trying to do in order to defeat it temporary is kind of tragic when you find out the extent that they're willing to go, and then the extent that our main hero Tidus finally figures out how to defeat Sin. What he does after that is also pretty good. Enjoy the game. X-2, on the other hand, is 180. It's lighthearted. It's got an upbeat soundtrack. The story's upbeat. It's goofy. It tries to be comedic. I actually kind of enjoy this game, but I can understand why a lot of people don't, just because of the tone shift that that happens between the two games. But I found the combat system to be engaging, and I found that how they kind of reused the assets for a new game made it enjoyable enough for me to play through it. Both games are worth picking up, and with the collection being $15, I would give it my recommendation. Then we have Final Fantasy IV. These are the DS entries, which a lot of people consider the best of the Final Fantasy IV. It's a complete ground-up remake, adding extra story elements, adding extra gameplay elements. It's a really fun game following the Dark Knight Cecil on his quest to redeem himself and stop the evil Golbez. It has some old school flaws in it. Mainly, you're going to have to get used to the fact that your characters are going to swap every dungeon. The idea is that you have to strategize with new strategies every dungeon, but part of a role-playing game is grinding up your characters, leveling them up, and customizing them. And when they're constantly dying or just getting pushed off the team, it does get a little old, but it's still a fun game. Outside of the Final Fantasy series, I do want to talk of the Tales series. We do have Zestiria and Berseria for $12.49. I have Zestiria on the PC, thought it was a fun game. Large overworld, fun combat. It does get a little weak in the story presentation of this game. It's just a tad bit dull, as it follows Sore, who is the shepherd who's out to purify the malevolence of the world. The problem is unlike the other Tales games, which have a lot of skits and a lot of personality to their characters, it's not quite here. You do have Edna, and you do have a few other characters that do have their moments and bring joy in the series. But for the most part, Sore is kind of a do-gooding kid. Doesn't have much personality beyond that. Speaking about games of the Tales series with a do-gooding kid, I should recommend Tales of Symphonia for $5. Again, when this came out on PC several years ago, a lot of people bashed it, and rightfully so. When it was first released on PC about 5 years ago, it came in a very, very broken state. Namco has patched the hell out of it since. It runs in 4K. You get the manga lines that the GameCube has. It runs 40 frames per second. Full HD, you get some of the Japanese extra. If you're into 60 frames per second frame rate, you're still going to want to check out that GameCube. But if you are looking for a solid Tales of game, PC version being $5, certainly a good pickup in my book. And then finally, I want to hit on the Neptunia series real fast. Steam sales are the best time to pick up a Neptunia game. My advice is never buy a Neptunia game full price unless you're freaking crazy. Because although I love the game's story, cheesecake and all most of the time, the gameplay in these games are mediocre at best. But let's pick out two of my favorites. Mega Dimension Victory 2 is $9.99. Love this game. Love the way it skewered Square Enix and Capcom, giving them both comical skewering as well as homages. Love the story. Love the fact that it centers around the Dreamcast, an oft-forgotten system. A system that I think in a lot of ways could say life isn't fair when it comes to just kind of how screwed it got. And I just love the presentation of this game. It's fun. Battle system's the best that the Neptunia has, and overall it's probably one of the longest games in the franchises without reusing too many of its assets. And then if I had to pick which one I would recommend when it comes to the Hyperdimensional Rebirth series, that's a little hard because Rebirth 3 is both my favorite and my least favorite. If I had to pick an individual game which was the best, Rebirth 3 would be the best. If I had to pick which one disappointed me the most, it would be Rebirth 3. The problem with Rebirth 3 is that it reuses everything from Hyperdimension Rebirth 1 and 2 when it comes to the gameplay. No new dungeons, no new enemies. You've seen it all before. That said, story is excellent. The story is hilarious. Going back this time to skewer the beginnings of the PlayStation as well as the Famicom and Sega Genesis war in Japan. And then you have Plutia, who represents the Sega Genesis, and her split personality, kind of this lesbian dominatrix version of the Hulk, I thought was just freaking hilarious. Definitely worth a pickup if you want a laugh, if you don't mind a lot of cheesecake in your humor. Again, a lot of seasoned JRPGs pros kind of like to bash the series, and for some good reason. Gameplay is mediocre, and there's a lot of cheesecake fan service, but there's a lot of humor and charm in this as well, and I do enjoy these games, just as long as you pick them up on the cheap. There's no way in hell you should be paying $30, $40, $50, or even $60 for these games. 5 to 10 definitely, but not 60. At any rate, this is Tommy the Game Master thanking you for watching this video. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below.